Today I'm going to make a quick tier list for Predecessor. It's been a couple days since the new patch, which lots of changes to the carry and bruiser build specifically, and I'm going to try to give some insight onto my opinion on characters from a competitive mindset and how I would value some of these characters. So I'm just going to get into it. We're going to start with Countess. I think Countess is pretty underwhelming, to be honest, at a competitive level. I think her late game is really strong, but you're going to get bullied out in the lane. You're going to start the game behind. You're almost never going to be ahead on Countess. If you are, then the game is already won. However, it's just not realistic. You have a weak fight early game, and you're kind of just you're a late game champion. That's basically it. If you scale, you scale. If you don't get to scale, which you shouldn't against good players, then you're going to be fine in the late game, but you shouldn't really get there. So, in my opinion, I think she's a little underwhelming. I don't really ever see a reason to pick her over pretty much any of the other mid laners most of the time. And your jungle off lane is not particularly strong either. You're easy to gank, low mobility, high late game. Like, your late game potential is really strong, but you're just not going to get there, especially with the junglers that are being played right now and some of the more pressure oriented picks that are coming out. People want to fight and they're going to force fights early. If you're not getting kills and getting a lead on Countess, you're not going to have a good time. I wouldn't really recommend playing her. However, I don't think she is unplayable. Next, we have Crunch. I think Crunch is a lot better on this new patch. I don't think he is insane, but I think he is a lot better, especially with some of the changes to things like augmentation. Mutilator and augmentation is really, really strong on him. However, I don't think he is a top pick. He is still a flex pick, which makes him really valuable. I would probably put him in B tier. You could debate him being A tier. I might end up moving him later after looking at some of where I would value some of these other picks. But for me, he's not a first two, top two pick, but he is good as like the bottom half of the draft, you know, third, fourth, fifth pick in your team composition. I think he can be very potent. Next up, we have Decker. I think Decker is pretty low, honestly. I'd probably put her even below Countess. The problem with Decker is that you don't really pick her before you pick other supports. The only reason you pick Decker is because the other supports are gone. That's really it. She's just inconsistent. If you're not hitting her stuns, you're weak. You're pretty like meh in the lane. You're meh in team fights. You can be impactful, but it really requires your team to already be like doing stuff. You can't really carry the game as Decker, but she is, she's fun to play, I guess. Definitely just a C tier character. Nothing crazy about her. Nothing bad either. Just a very meh character. Next up, we have Drongo. I would probably value Drongo as one of the best characters in the game. Probably the best ADC for sure. They just basically buffed his whole kit. He works really well with the new items. Just a really, really strong character. Definitely worth playing Drongo if you haven't. I know EU doesn't really like him that much, but over here on NA, we love Drongo. I think he is absolutely insane. Gag Grenade's still one of the best abilities in the game. CC immunity. You're really strong into a lot of these bruiser picks being picked up right now, like Crunch or Grux or Chimera. A lot of stuff coming out of the jungle like that, and he's very strong into those picks. Very easy to set up CC chains as well if you get, some type of CC and then you get like a Drongo grenade gets put on the person that's CCing them. They're pretty much just guaranteed dead at that point. Just very, very strong character. Next we have Fang. I don't think Fang's unplayable. I think D tier is more like unplayable characters. I think Fang is playable, but I think he's weak. You're a no CC character, which means your gank is pretty weak. Your late game is not necessarily incredible. You're a 1v1 character, or a character that basically wants to 1v1, but you don't win 1v1s, so you kind of have to play him as a cleanup character, in which case there are just better characters at doing that. So I think he's C tier, probably maybe the worst character in the game. Debatably, he's not unplayable, just very underwhelming. Next up, we have the Fae. I would say the Fae is probably the second best mid laner, honestly. She's very, very potent in lane and has one of the best team fights in the game. The Megacosm change or shift, whatever you want to call it, does hurt her a little bit in the late game, but for the most part, you don't really feel it. You're not going to notice it too much since you're just poking with your E a lot of the game anyways. Definitely a good character, worth playing if you haven't. Next we have Gadget. I think Gadget is top of the B tier. She is very good at just playing safe and getting guaranteed damage, free poke. The Megacosm change hurts her a lot. She was probably the best character at applying Megacosm previously and really took advantage of the Disintegrate passive. However, with that being changed and some of the other characters being played right now, like Crunch, I think she goes down a little bit. I think she was A tier. Right now, I think she's top of B tier. Can be played in offlane, so she is kind of like a flex pick, but you are no CC, so if you play her in offlane, you have to be aware that you do have a character in offlane that does not have CC, so you cannot set up for your team. You do bring a lot of damage potential, though, and you have good control in team fights, good objective pit control, stuff like that, so you are still a really good character, just not as good as you were. Gideon, competitively, I still think Gideon is the best mid laner. Megacosm change doesn't really affect him at all. It does like suck that you can't, hit somebody, proc your passive, and then ult them and just solo them immediately after finishing Megacosm, but you are still incredibly strong. Very good. True Silver is still a busted item. Just very good character. Play some Gideon. Competitively, probably the most high valued mid laner. He gets banned a lot, gets first picked a lot in scrims. Just really good character. Definitely high value, high priority. Probably put him above Drongo in terms of priority in draft. Grux. Grux is really good. Flex pick, good pressure. Probably one of the biggest bullies in the lane. Almost uncontestable on first river buff. Sets up good ganks, has good ganks, good engage, you can flash ult, stuff like that. Just really good character, good at chasing people down. His Bonesaw, one of his best items, got buffed. He likes augmentation. He likes a lot of the changes to items, and he is just strong. The fact that ADCs don't blow him up either anymore, when you go these more like hybrid-y, damage-y type items, is very good for him. Very, very strong character. I'd actually probably put him above the Fae, just because a lot of the mid laners are generally in this A-B tier, other than Gideon, so you can kind of pick all of them, but Grux is definitely like a high priority pick in a lot of competitive scrims and stuff like that right now. Howitzer is just kind of B tier. I mean, he's good. He's not the best, but he's good. He bullies a lot of the other mid laners, but you don't have as much AoE damage. If you get a lead on Howitzer, you can run the game by yourself single-handedly. I would personally probably put him in A tier for myself. However, I think in general terms, he's generally considered like B tier. The reason being, you don't really want to top pick him, but if you can get a good Howitzer game and you pick him later in the draft, he can be very, very potent. Just not really a top pick worthy character. Kalari. I think Kalari's B tier. People might not like this or disagree, but her solo lane is actually pretty strong. Her jungle is alright, but she's primarily, in my opinion, a solo laner. You pick her for higher pressure and into lower pressure picks. You just force, basically, when you pick a Kalari, you want to force the other team to posture for objectives. If you can get in a position where the other team can't do objectives, you just have your Kalari go split push. She wins basically every 1v1. Otherwise, you have her play kind of cleanup and just kind of look to hunt the enemy backline. And if you get the opportunity to, you can just one-shot somebody very easily. None of her items really got changed. Still very strong. Really good character in terms of what she does. She does what she does really well. And if you can play that type of play style, you can get a lot of value on her. Not a high priority pick, but definitely a good pick if you could play it. It is important, though, when you do have a Kalari to make sure that you have frontline somewhere, whether that be offlane because you're playing Kalari jungle or frontline in the jungle and you're playing Kalari offlane. Usually you want to pair with something like a Rampage or maybe a Richter support to kind of help your frontline out a little bit. Next up, we have Chimera. Chimera, Kingsbane, insane. Really good character on this patch. This is more of a prediction. I kind of predict him to be at the top of A tier. Safe call would be he's probably B tier, but I think he's actually going to be really, really strong. Even in like high-level competitive play where people are, communicating, you're getting CC chained, you're getting blown up, things like that. I actually think he's still going to be really, really strong. Just a very good jungle. Kind of suffers from the Rampage issue where you can kind of play him off lane, but generally you're only going to be playing him in jungle. So maybe he's not like a first pick character, but if you're a second pick and you have 2 picks because it's snake draft, you might pick him in those top 2 of the other. But it just depends. He also counters Rampage, who I do think is the best jungler right now. Even still, with like the Kingsbane and all that kind of stuff being, augmentation, all that, I think Rampage is still going to be the best jungler. I think he's still S tier, but we'll see. Next up, we have Bellica. I think Bellica's B tier. She's just a flex pick. She's just difficult to play. If you hit your abilities, you're good. If you don't hit your abilities, you kind of suck. Very similar to a character like Richter, where I think if you're hitting every knockup and you're hitting every bomb, you're going to be very impactful. If you're missing that stuff, you're just not going to have an impact in the game. Very hit or miss, but still a solid character in my opinion. Next up, we have Murdoch. I think Murdoch's one of the ADCs that actually gets weaker on this patch. I'd probably put him somewhere down here. I don't think I'm really picking him over like a mid pick. However, if the other team has already taken Drongo or something, then maybe I just play Murdoch, something like that. He's just Murdoch. I mean, he does Murdoch things. You get the global ultimate, stuff like that. You're pretty safe. You have the knockback. I mean, you're just Murdoch. Nothing special, really. Next up, we have Muriel. Muriel is probably A tier. This might be a little controversial. Some people might think she is S tier. I think she personally is in A tier. The main reason being that if you pick a Muriel, while you do have a lot of shielding and you can keep your team alive, you do not have any actual crowd control outside of the knockup on your ultimate, which means that if you pick a Muriel, you have to pick other stuff that has CC in your team comp. Which basically means you can't play stuff like Shimbi or Gadget with it. You could, but then you just you don't really have any ways to get picks, so you kind of have to all in without CC, and not having lockdown is not necessarily something you want on your team comp. So I think she's A tier, but some people again might disagree. Definitely a good character, definitely worth top 2ing if you're second pick, something like that, after some stuff gets banned. But overall, don't think she is first pick worthy. Next up, we have Narvash. I think Narvash is A tier. I think he is good at what Narvash does. Good at keeping your team alive. Good at doing objectives, especially after fights. If you win a fight and people are poked out, you can just heal up and do an objective. You can basically infinitely tank stuff and bait fights. Very, very strong in lane. Good rotator. He's very hard to pick on rotations because you're fast and you have the stun and all that kind of stuff. Just very good character. He speeds minions up, all that kind of stuff. You can infant freeze on your tower line. Just solid character. Very, very good. Next up, we have Rampage. I think Rampage is probably the best character in the game. I'd probably pick him over even something like Gideon. I think he is still just nuts in the jungle. One of the fastest clears. One of the best characters at solo frontlining. If you have double frontline, even better. Just an absolutely insane character. Probably should be banned in most games, if not first picked. Next up, we have Richter. I think Richter is very good if you're hitting your hooks. If you're hitting your hooks, you don't miss a single hook, the best character in the game. If you're not hitting your hooks consistently, worst character in the game. He's very hit or miss, and I think similar to how Bellica is, but more general purpose than Bellica. He plays 3 roles. You can play him offlane, jungle, support. Another frontline pick, so if you play something like Kalari offlane, for example, again, you might play a Richter support combined with a tank jungler or a hybrid jungler like Crunch, and then you kind of have a little bit more beef in your frontline. To compensate for having the Kalari solo lane or Kalari jungler or something like that, or even Gadget solo. And I think he's very good at getting picks, decent team fights. Riftwalker is still really good. He does get a little worse with the cleanse active that's been put in the game now instead of the cripple. So you have to be careful of that. But as long as you're aware of that stuff, he's very, very good. Again, if you're hitting your hooks. More of a high skill kept character than a low skill floor. I wouldn't really recommend it for new players, but if you're confident, definitely good pick. Next up, we have Severog. I think Severog is a little worse this patch. I think he's B tier. I don't think he's crazy, but I think a lot of these more heavy pressure bully type solo laners like Crunch and Grux are going to be played a lot more. I actually would going to put him below Crunch. I think he gets bullied very easily in lane, and I think getting bullied is not good in solo lane, since you're just going to end up being behind. And I think you're going to see a lot more Crunch solo, a lot more Grux solo, a lot more of these higher pressure picks that kind of just bully Severog. He's still a monster in the late game, but you have to get him late game. Something about a Countess where if you can't get out of the early game, it doesn't matter how good your late game is. Next up, we have Sparrow. I think Sparrow is probably the second best ADC. She's a hard one to place because it's so hard to get a gauge on how good of a character she is right now. I'm going to put her in the middle of A tier. I think Eviscerator getting lifesteal makes her a lot stronger. Her late game is a lot better. really good with on hits. You could build a little bit of crit if you want to. One of the few ADCs where I think Bonesaw is actually worth picking up on. And she can just be very, very strong with her ultimate in team fights and one of the best late game characters in the game. Her laning phase is still weak. You're still immobile, but, you know, there's a trade-off on her, and I think it's easier to get her to late game than it would be to get somebody like Countess, especially since you compare her with something like a Narvash or a Muriel and really help her out in the laning phase. Steel, still busted. I mean, he's just S tier. There's not really much to talk about with Steel. You get 3 stuns. You know, you have a dash, a wall that stops ADCs from playing the game. Just a good character. I mean, there's not really a lot to talk about with Steel. He's just good. Plays 3 roles. Just a good pick. Next up, we have Revenant. Revenant, I think, is probably upper B tier. He is a little worse this patch with crit being nerfed a little bit, but I don't think he is top tier. I think he is just balanced. His late game is really strong. His laning phase is pretty strong. His mid game is a little weak. The problem with the crit right now is that if you want to go crit, your build is a lot more expensive than going the on-hit builds, which means you have to be getting kills and you have to be snowballing. If you're not getting kills, you're just going to be behind in terms of power spikes to the other ADC, and you're just going to get outscaled before you even get a chance to play the game. He is good, but you have to be rolling. Very good to pairing with something like a Richter, something that really wants to fight early. Narvash is another good character that wants to fight early. If you pair him with something like a Bellica or a Muriel, something like that, you might struggle a little bit more in the early game, and then you're going to have a rough transition into that late game. But if you can get active early and you can get fights going, you can force fights around objective pits, early Fang 2, stuff like that, you can really shine in those moments. Lastly, we have Shimbi. I haven't seen a ton of Shimbi on this patch since they fixed a lot of the bugs that she had, which kind of put her down a little bit. Megacosm also got nerfed, which hurts her lane a little bit. Definitely her best item. I'd say she's probably middle of the pack. I don't think she's the best character in the game. I don't think she's the worst. Very mobile still has good damage. Just a solid character. I don't think she's crazy. I don't think she's, giga busted. Last patch she was probably S tier. With the bug fixes and Megacosm nerfs, I think she's probably B tier. Just a generally decent character. Play her if you want to, but not required to play her every game. But that's all for today. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of these places. And thank you guys for watching.